Yep. Timeout LA. Whack! Get out! Get away from me, Steve. Get away from me, Steve. I asked him 3 times to stop staring at me to try to intimidate me. I'm done. He's gone.
Both teams play hard, my man. Both teams play hard. Both teams play hard.
Kwame was sensational last night on the offensive glass, and he worked his tail off at both ends of the floor.
God bless and good night.
Throughout his NBA career, Rasheed Wallace was probably more known for his, well, his antics, his technical fouls, his colorful personality. In fact, when most people look back at his career, it's always those things, rather than his actual production on the floor. Sheed has always been a polarizing figure, but in this video, we're gonna take a detailed look into his NBA journey and evaluate how good he actually was. This was a guy who played on some of the most iconic teams we've ever seen. The Trailblazers of the early 2000s, better known as the Jailblazers. The Pistons in the mid-2000s, one of the most dominant teams of that era, but they were completely different than any other team in the league. How good was he during those years? And perhaps nowadays, he doesn't get the credit he deserves for being a crucial piece on multiple contenders. How's it going, folks? My name's Andy, and let's get started. Drafted with the 4th pick in 1995, Wallace spent his rookie season as a member of the Washington Bullets, but since they already had Chris Webber and Juwan Howard, there was no point in keeping him. I'm not sure why they drafted him in the first place. Wallace got traded to Portland in the summer of 1996, and this is where he quickly rose up the ranks. He made a name for himself as a super versatile power forward, with an incredible scoring arsenal. Very rarely did we see big men who were as light on their feet and incredibly rough and strong down in the paint. Wallace had the finesse and the physicality. He did a little bit of everything, a perfect partner to play alongside Arvydas Sabonis. While the term stretch 4 was not very widespread back in those years, Wallace was one of the first players to popularize that playstyle. Both Sabonis and Wallace had the ability to play in the high and low posts, taking turns scoring from the paint and perimeter. They gave opposing defenses an incredibly hard time. Sheed was surprisingly efficient for a guy who didn't have the best shot selection. In his first season in Portland, he ranked 3rd in the league in field goal percentage, even finishing ahead of Shaquille O'Neal. Early on, he didn't shoot a lot of threes, but he did take a sizable number of long twos, and he was very good at them. In 7 seasons in Portland, he shot 45% from mid-range and 72% at the rim, both of which are phenomenal. Wallace was unique, cause nobody else was that good from so many areas of the floor. The success of the Blazers was a great story, a team that, despite not having the star power of their peers, still competed with the best of them. Everyone talks about, how these Blazers teams were marred with off-court issues, and that much is true. But as dysfunctional as it seemed, these Blazers played team basketball at its finest. To give you an example, in the 1998-99 season, the Blazers had the 2nd best record in the Western Conference, and they reached the conference finals. Yet, not a single player on the team averaged more than 14 points per game. Their highest scorer, Isaiah Rider, led the team with 13.9 points per game. It was similar a year later, where they won 59 games and was 1 game away from the finals. Wallace led the team in scoring with a mere 16 points per game, while the Lakers, on the other hand, were basically a 2-man show, Kobe and Shaq. The Blazers were so close to winning a championship, they had a 15-point lead in the 4th quarter before the Lakers stormed back. As years went by, the Blazers saw many changes to their roster, but Wallace remained the consistent factor. He made back-to-back All-Star appearances and continued his rise to NBA prominence. In the early 2000s, most people would agree that the best power forwards in the league were Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett, Dirk Nowitzki, and Chris Webber. While Wallace was not in the same tier as them, he was knocking on the door. He can compete with them on any given night. As the Blazers overhauled their roster, Wallace saw a wave of new teammates, many of whom were a bad influence. I don't think anyone ever considered Wallace as a level-headed, mild-mannered guy, but now it really blew up. Badly. His technical fouls were getting out of control, leading the league for 3 straight years and setting the all-time record with 41 techs in a single season. I don't even think that's possible today. You'd be suspended before getting that many. The rules on technical fouls changed directly because of Wallace. The NBA wanted to clean up the league, and now they give harsher penalties for every tech you get. Not just him, but it seemed like the entire team was involved in legal issues every month. Between Damon Stoudemire, Bonzi Wells, and Ruben Patterson, they routinely got suspended for substance abuse and other miscellaneous things. At one point, Sheed got suspended for threatening referee Tim Donaghy off the court. By this point, he was still considered one of the best power forwards in the league and having the best seasons of his career, but the Blazers were continuing to get knocked out of the first round. And most importantly, Wallace's reputation took a nosedive. To make matters worse, as an individual, Wallace seemed to have hit a wall. Now, averaging 19 and 8 is still pretty damn good, but his efficiency was slowly dropping. He started transitioning away from the basket as more and more of his shots came from outside. The drama surrounding the team has seeped into his play. Wallace got impatient, and the Blazers wanted to get rid of their bad image. As a result, at the 2004 trade deadline, the Blazers were ready to move on. They traded him to the Atlanta Hawks, where he played just 1 game. Shout out to those who got a Wallace Hawks jersey. But yeah, shortly after, he got traded again, this time to Detroit. The 29-year-old Wallace arrived in Detroit with a mixed perception. The fanbase and Detroit media were excited, since the last thing they were missing was a good power forward. But they approached him with caution. The team didn't give up much to get him, but the Pistons were on a roll. Even before trading for Wallace, they'd been doing quite well, hoping for a successful postseason. They feared his acquisition would ruin the chemistry, due to his, character issues. And he was kind of a wild card. That wasn't just the perception of the fans though, even many members of the front office were hesitant to trade for him. They had lengthy discussions of whether or not adding him was a good idea. However, one guy, Joe Dumars, the executive of the year and president of the Pistons, assured everyone that Wallace would be the perfect fit for this team. When questioned about this, Dumars responded, "Character issues never entered into our decision-making process. Everywhere he's been, his teammates and coaches rave about him as a teammate and as a guy to coach. His issues have always been about getting calls." Almost immediately, Wallace was accepted in Detroit, and it turns out he was exactly what they were missing. Looking back, most NBA writers agree that this was the moment Detroit went from being a solid playoff team to a legitimate contender. Arguably the most impactful trade deadline deal in NBA history. Surrounded by older veterans, a great staff, and a franchise with a mission, Wallace flourished. While his raw stats were not the same compared to Portland, his game evolved. He started to shoot more threes and became a respectable three-point shooter. His defense, which is something he wasn't known for, he turned that around too. Playing on a team with a heavy defensive identity, it couldn't help but rub off on him. The once hot-headed, erratic player developed a new reputation. While Ben Wallace was the anchor on the team, Sheed was the glue. He brought everyone together and complemented the entire team so well. Due to his versatility, he can space the floor, but also at this stage of his career, he bulked up a lot to guard opposing centers in a pinch. On offense, he was no longer the primary scorer, but he willingly listened to the coaches and fit in wherever they needed him. If a play was set up for Rip, Wallace would scoot to the side and space the floor in case he needs to pass it out. If they were running the pick and roll or pick and pop, Wallace was adept at rolling or popping a jumper. However, these Pistons teams were always known for their elite defense, and offense was a struggle. Sheed didn't exactly fix their offensive woes, but he certainly softened them. He was never a great one-on-one player, but if you needed someone to throw the ball to and get a bucket or a foul, he was always there to help. Few players on the roster could create their own shots, but Sheed was one of them. They needed him to score since his frontcourt partner, Ben, was not a scoring threat whatsoever. Not only that, but he developed into a true leader. Rip Hamilton and Chauncey Billups praised him as the guy who uplifted everyone in the locker room. He brought a sense of humor and camaraderie to a team that was very stoic. His work ethic and drive to win the title was far and above the rest of the squad, and that inspired all of his teammates. At first, there were concerns of chemistry issues due to his reputation as a loose cannon, but that was put to rest the moment he walked into the locker room. He gave the team an edge, which previously they did not have. Everything came together in the 2004 finals, the greatest underdog story we've seen in a long time. So, how good was Rasheed Wallace actually? Well, talent-wise, he was always a step below the top-tier power forwards of his generation. Nobody thought he was better than KG or Dirk or Duncan. At his peak in Portland, he was arguably a top 15-ish player in the league, arguably a top 5 power forward right behind those aforementioned players. It's sad because NBA media has reduced him to a meme, or a head case on the Jailblazers. That discredits all the good things people have said about him. He was never a bad teammate, he never made any of his teams worse. His motivation to win and his leadership skills were overlooked, but that's what made him who he was. Perhaps he never reached his ceiling due to his early attitude problems, but overall, Wallace had a great career. A 4-time All-Star, a champion, but unfortunately not a Hall of Famer. Anyway, that's all folks, thank you all so much for watching, let me know your thoughts on Sheed. And of course, as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.